Today I offer you a sermon. Now, this is not a new sermon. This is a sermon I actually preached April 12th, 2020, on Easter Day. But I thought since it's Easter again, it would be a good time to reshare this. The passage for this particular sermon was the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. Hear the word of the Lord. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in, and he saw the linen wrappings laying there. But he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him, and he went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. And the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting there where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned and she saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. The word of God for the people of God. When I was young, every summer, we would take a 2-week vacation to Mississippi to visit my dad's side of the family. While there, we would spend time with several relatives, and one of those relatives was Grandma Mary McGuffey. Because of where she was located, we were able to visit her on the way through to see the others and on the way back. So we were there twice each year, hanging out with her in her small apartment in her retirement housing complex. Certain memories really stuck with me. On one trip in particular, we all tried to play Uno, but since Grandma couldn't tell green from blue very well, we had to make this big X on the blue cards so that she knew which was which. All she had to do then was remember that it was the blue cards that had the X on them. Apparently, this was a little harder than you would think, but we all had a blast. I also remember our small Pekingese poodle named Cotton chasing toads at night and what little space she had in her front yard. But I think the thing I remember most is what I saw every time we left. As our car pulled away and I looked out the back window, there Grandma stood in the same spot, right at the end of the sidewalk, waving goodbye with tears in her eyes. Grandma Mary loved us. She missed us when we were gone, and she only got to see us once a year. It was painful for her when it was time for us to leave. Saying goodbye was very, very hard for her. After I had become a senior in high school, I no longer had to go on those annual vacations, so I opted to stay home. And a few years later, when I was in college, my mom called me and let me know that Grandma Mary had passed on. Now the time had come for us to say our goodbyes. Certain kinds of goodbyes are never easy. When Mary Magdalene went to the tomb of Jesus early in the morning before the sun rose, she was going to go say goodbye one last time. And saying goodbye to Jesus was especially hard for her. You see, it appears that she was extremely close to Jesus, perhaps closer than all of the others in some ways. In fact, the closeness of their relationship, as portrayed in the stories, has led some scholars to think maybe they may have had a relationship. But whether or not they did, it's safe to say, at the very least, they each held a special place in one another's hearts. And here she is, before the sun rises, standing at his tomb. As she's walking up, it is still dark, so it's a bit hard to see. And as she gets closer, she notices that something is off. The stone that's supposed to cover the burial cave, it's been rolled aside. In other words, the door that's supposed to be locked is wide open. Something has obviously gone terribly, terribly wrong, and so she goes to get help. She runs all the way back to talk with Peter and another disciple. She tells them what she saw, and they both come rushing back with her. The men go into the tomb ahead of her, and inside they find nothing. There is no body. It's gone. There's nothing for them here. So Peter and the other disciple return home. Mary, however, stays. You see, she came to say farewell. She lost her Lord to death once, and now it appears that she's lost him again, robbing her of the opportunity to say that one final goodbye. She just doesn't know what to do with this. More than anything in the whole wide world, she wants him back right now. She really, really wants him back, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. She's not going to let this go. And then she hears someone behind her saying, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" She turns, and before her stands a man. He appears to be a gardener. It's not someone she knows, and since she knows everybody in her religious community, she knows that he isn't one of the followers of Jesus. But maybe this man, this complete stranger, maybe he knows something. Maybe he can help her to say goodbye. Caught up in her own grief, Mary is simply not able to see the significance of what is happening right before her very own eyes. She's heard Jesus talk about the resurrection, but blinded by grief, she cannot yet see its power, even though it's right there in front of her. In many respects, she is still caught up in what has come before this moment. Before this moment in front of the tomb, in the beginning through the incarnation, Christ came to us and pitched his tent among us, dwelling with us, living with us, in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, a living, breathing human being. At Christmas, we celebrate this event. We celebrate the coming of Emmanuel, God with us, Emmanuel, in a vulnerable baby who is destined to grow up and do great things. But no matter who you are, living is a finite endeavor. Nobody lives forever on this earth. Death comes for us all. And for Jesus, death came for him in the form of a cross. And so, there Mary Magdalene stands before an empty tomb, longing for the chance to say one final goodbye. But remember this, my friends. A raindrop that dives into the ocean becomes far more than anything it could have ever been as just a drop of rain. living is finite. It's true. But life itself is infinite and eternal. Today, we celebrate a new kind of birth, one different from that of Christmas. Today, we celebrate Easter. Today, we celebrate the power of the resurrection. And it is by this divine power that Christ has passed from the womb of mere living through the gates of death and into something far more. By the power of the resurrection, Christ emerged into life itself. And more than that, actually. Because by the power of resurrection, Christ not only passed through death and emerged into life itself, but became life itself for us. And life itself is something that cannot be contained, even by the deepest, most threatening darkness found in the power of death. And so, there Mary Magdalene stood before this complete stranger, hoping that he could help her to say goodbye. But then, something happened. Her eyes opened, and she saw it. She really saw it. She realized that if she wanted to find her heart's desire, he wasn't to be found in a temple or a church made of wood and stone. He wasn't going to be found somewhere above the clouds. He wasn't even going to be found in the body laying in a grave. Rather, she saw and found her Lord, her Christ, her love in the life itself that was housed by the flesh and bone of the stranger before her. Death had been transformed. No longer was it about saying goodbye. Rather, it had become about learning to say hello in a new way. Many years ago, I read a parable of sorts. I think it was written by Edward Hayes, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and try to retell it in my own way. Some time ago, 3 young spiritual seekers sought out a wise teacher in order to grow in their faith. They had sought a word of wisdom for their lives, and when they arrived, they found the teacher standing on a hill. And they asked, "Teacher, would you please give us a word of wisdom by which to live?" Okay, so the teacher asked them all this question. At what point is it that night becomes day? The first young seeker said, Oh, I know. It's when you can look out into the distance and you see the first rays of sunlight breaking over the horizon. Seemed easy enough, right? The wise teacher listened, thought about it for a moment, and said, very observant. But no. The second seeker then followed up with, "Oh, I know. It's when you can look out into the distance and you see a bush. But then you realize the bush isn't really a bush, it's a goat." To this, the wise one said, "Very good." But no. So the third seeker paused. You see, the first 2 had been wrong. Now, surely there was a trick to all of this. There had to be a much more complicated answer, right? And so the seeker thought for a moment, then began to smile and said, "It is when you're looking out at the world around you and suddenly you start to see the vibrancy of color." And to this, the wise teacher said, but still no. Completely confused and a bit frustrated, the 3 seekers finally said, "So tell us, at what point is it that night turns into day?" The teacher then said, "It is when you can look upon the face of any other human being, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, the color of their skin, or what they believe. It's when you look upon the face of this other human being and you say, truly, this one before me, this stranger, is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone, my sister, my brother, a temple unto the living Spirit of my Lord. Because if you cannot do that, no matter how high that sun hangs in the sky, it is still night in your heart. Mary Magdalene, on that morning, as the scales fell from her eyes, experienced night becoming day. Finally, she saw what Jesus was talking about when he said he must be raised from the dead. In that moment, her blindness became sight, her mourning was transformed into joy, and her goodbye became hello. She now knew that her Christ truly would be with her until the end of the age. Yes, the human being known as Jesus died more than 2,000 years ago upon that cross. But passing through death, he became more than anything he could ever be as a finite being. And having joined with us all, he carries us, each and every one, into life itself. Indeed, a raindrop that dives into the ocean becomes something far more than it ever could be as just a drop of rain. O death, where now is thy sting? Rejoice, my friends, for Christ is risen indeed. May you find him in whomever you meet. May you experience the blessing of abundant life every single day. And may you all have a very happy Easter.